Yossi Sharvat, the leader of Israel's most elite commando unit, and Amir, a fearless lieutenant, found themselves deep inside Iranian territory, racing against time to prevent a missile strike that could ignite World War III. But as they planted explosives inside a remote missile silo, they had no idea that a seemingly innocent tweet from Donald Trump was the spark that set this deadly chain of events in motion. As Iran's secret missile program neared completion, the fate of millions hung in the balance and the clock was ticking. In a remote desert expanse of southeastern Iran, surrounded by jagged mountains and endless sand, a hidden military complex buzzed with quiet activity. There were no official maps marking its presence. No satellite images showed any structures. From above, it appeared as a patch of untouched earth. But buried beneath the ground was a facility known only to a select group within Iran's top military and scientific elite. A facility responsible for the creation of one of the most dangerous weapons ever developed in modern history. Inside, engineers, physicists, and military technicians worked in total secrecy for over 5 years on a project known only by its codename, Zulfikar X. Named after a mythical sword, the missile was unlike anything Iran or any other country had ever produced. It wasn't just another long-range ballistic weapon. It was a stealth missile, built with cutting-edge materials that absorbed radar, waves, emitted no heat signature, and could travel at hypersonic speed while adjusting its path in real time. It had no fixed flight pattern, no digital trail, and no known countermeasures. Once launched, there would be no warning. No sirens. No chance to respond. The missile was designed with a specific purpose, to strike Israel without being detected. But not just anywhere in Israel. It was programmed to target a facility so secret, most Israelis didn't even know it existed. The Iranians believed the site held critical data on Israel's nuclear deterrent and housed AI-driven weapon systems that could change the balance of power in the region. A direct hit would cripple Israel's technological edge. The strike would be silent, sudden, and deniable. Iran's leadership viewed it as the perfect plan, a devastating blow with no fingerprints. Planning for the operation began years earlier, when Iranian intelligence received a tip from an unnamed source embedded in an international aid organization. This source had unwittingly passed along location data from encrypted communication logs, data that, when analyzed by Iranian cyber units, revealed the coordinates of what was referred to in intercepted emails as Site 27. The name meant nothing at first, but satellite sweeps and signal monitoring confirmed that this location, deep underground, near a barren valley in southern Israel, was active and heavily protected. Iran's military command approved Project Black Crescent soon after. As construction of the missile neared completion, final tests were conducted in total radio silence. No electronic signals were allowed within 50 kilometers of the launch base. Every detail of the operation was controlled, rehearsed, and recorded on paper only. No one outside the highest level of command knew the full picture. Iran was preparing to fire the first undetectable missile in human history, and no one in the world had a clue it was coming. Far beneath the rocky terrain of southern Israel lies a facility so secretive that not even top military personnel are briefed on its exact function. Known only as Site 27, it is buried deep within the Negev desert, beneath layers of reinforced concrete, granite, and advanced electronic countermeasures. The facility does not appear on any map, and its existence is known to fewer than 24 people worldwide. From above, it appears as little more than a restricted military testing range. But underground, it is the nerve center of Israel's most advanced defense technologies. Site 27 houses experimental research in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and cyber warfare, all focused on future-proofing Israel's military edge. Even more critically, it contains prototype blueprints for next-generation nuclear countermeasures and highly sensitive algorithms that drive the automated targeting systems of Israel's Iron Dome and David's Sling defense systems. It is not a weapons depot in the traditional sense. No rockets are stored there. No missiles are armed and ready. Instead, it holds the intellectual backbone of Israel's defense strategy, the software, data, and systems that make every modern Israeli weapon smarter and faster than its enemies. Iran's intelligence division knew none of this at first. The name Site 27 had come up in fragments of digital communication picked up through a humanitarian aid organization that unknowingly served as a listening post. While workers provided medical support in the Gaza border region, several encrypted emails were intercepted by Iranian cyber units. The emails included vague references to scheduled updates at Site 27, timed around certain satellite passes and cyber activity blackouts. Iranian analysts took notice. Initially, the location seemed unimportant, just another desert outpost. But repeated satellite flyovers began to show subtle signs of unusual electromagnetic activity, bursts of power at night, heat signatures that did not align with surface structures, patterns consistent with deeply buried, climate-controlled environments. Through months of silent observation and algorithmic analysis, Iran's intelligence community concluded that this hidden site had high-level strategic value. What they didn't yet know was its true purpose. That uncertainty didn't stop them. Targeting Site 27 became a symbolic and strategic decision. If the location was important enough to be hidden, then destroying it could send a message far louder than hitting Tel Aviv or a military base. The attack would not be aimed at population centers or conventional targets. It would be a blow to the core of Israel's defense intellect, a strike that would cripple not just systems, but capabilities. Iran's military command agreed. Site 27 would be the first and only target of the Zulfikar X missile. A ghost facility would soon become ground zero. In the early hours of a quiet Thursday morning, a low-level technician working in Iran's top-secret missile facility made a critical error. Tasked with transferring internal test results of the Zulfikar X missile from one offline server to a restricted internal database, he mistakenly uploaded part of the classified data to a secondary system connected to an outdated backup network. The system had once been used for academic research collaboration, long since decommissioned, but still technically active. For a few hours, the classified file sat exposed, unknown to Iran's cybersecurity teams, unencrypted and vulnerable. Thousands of miles away, in a dimly lit apartment in Bucharest, Romania, a freelance cybersecurity analyst named Adrian Doru was combing through fragments of publicly available dark web metadata for a private think tank. His work often involved scanning for leaked intelligence, obscure military signatures, or anomalies in global data traffic. What caught his attention that night wasn't the file itself, but a strange encryption header, one used by Iranian military networks, but listed under a now-defunct academic institution. Curious, he pulled a copy and began dissecting it offline. The document was fragmented and incomplete. It contained rows of technical code and terms that seemed unfamiliar, even to someone with years of defense contracting experience. But one phrase stood out immediately. ZXHVP, Stealth Flight Pattern Simulation. Paired with coordinates and obscure references to a target Zone 27, the document hinted at something deeply unusual. Realizing the potential severity of the leak, Adrian forwarded the file to a contact within the U.S. intelligence community, someone he had previously worked with during a NATO cybercrime initiative. Within hours, a red flag was raised in Washington. While the document didn't contain launch codes or exact schematics, it referenced stealth propulsion technologies that Iran had never been known to possess. More alarming was the inclusion of flight path diagrams drawn over an unidentified area of southern Israel. The Pentagon dispatched analysts to cross-reference the leaked data with known Israeli installations. Although the name Site 27 wasn't officially recognized, the coordinates aligned disturbingly close to a region with long-standing electronic blackouts and restricted airspace. The leak was small, but it triggered a rapid escalation. Cybersecurity units in Israel and the United States began quietly scanning Iranian networks, looking for confirmation. Meanwhile, Iran discovered the breach within 48 hours, wiped the server, and arrested the technician responsible. But the damage had already been done. A single digital thread had unraveled part of one of the most tightly held military secrets in modern history, and the clock had started ticking. The digital leak had triggered silent alarms across multiple intelligence agencies, but outside the halls of power, no one in the public had any idea that the world was standing on the edge of something dangerous. That changed with a single cryptic social media post from former U.S. President Donald Trump. On a Saturday afternoon, while attending a rally in Florida, Trump opened his phone and typed a message that instantly sent shockwaves through political and intelligence circles. Something big is brewing in the Middle East. We know. They know. Time to be smart. At first, the post seemed like typical Trump bravado, vague, dramatic, and lacking context. But within minutes, analysts at the National Security Agency, CIA, and Israeli intelligence began to panic. The language, though general, mirrored the internal tone of recent classified briefings about Iran's new missile capabilities and the potential threat to Israel. Officials scrambled to determine whether Trump had been briefed about the Zulfikar X threat and if he had just carelessly revealed its existence to the public. Despite no longer being in office, Trump still had access to former advisors, some of whom remained connected to key military and intelligence figures. There were fears that a casual comment made in private may have been interpreted by Trump as something he could share publicly, not realizing its sensitivity. The post prompted an immediate response from both Israeli and American cybersecurity units. Back channels were activated to monitor chatter from Tehran, Moscow, and regional operatives. Suddenly, every nation watching the Middle East turned their attention to Iran. Within hours, major news outlets picked up the post, speculating wildly about its meaning. Some suggested it referred to ongoing tensions between Israel and Hamas, others to broader instability in the region. But behind closed doors, Israeli defense officials saw it as a potential breach of national security. The problem wasn't just what Trump had said, it was the timing. The message appeared just as Iran was completing final pre-launch procedures. It may have tipped off Tehran that someone knew something. In Tehran, analysts monitoring Western media took note of Trump's post as well. Some viewed it as coincidence, others saw it as proof that their plan had been compromised. Senior Iranian military officials ordered a rapid review of operational security and communications protocols. As confusion swirled across intelligence networks worldwide, one thing became clear. The situation was no longer confined to classified documents and hidden silos. The threat had gone public, even if no one yet understood what it meant. And with the clock ticking, everyone involved was forced to act faster than ever before. In the heart of Tel Aviv, inside a heavily guarded underground operations center, Mossad analysts reviewed new satellite imagery flagged by Israeli Air Force surveillance. The images showed something disturbing: 3 separate heat signatures emerging in remote regions of Iran, all consistent with large-scale fueling operations. But these weren't from known missile bases or previously tracked military zones. These were new, remote, hidden, and each of them matched the signature profile of a missile capable of carrying a long-range payload. The timing was too precise to be a coincidence. Just days after Trump's cryptic message and the leaked intelligence report from Romania, Iran appeared to be preparing for something major. Initial assumptions pointed to a single missile. Now, Israel had to face the possibility that there were 3. The Mossad launched a full-scale investigation. Analysts pored over historical satellite data, tracing faint construction signs, movement of supply trucks, and unusual radio silence patterns around the suspected sites. What they discovered was chilling. The 3 sites had been under slow development for over 2 years. Their construction was carefully masked, blending military hardware with civilian infrastructure and shielding activity under temporary structures that appeared and disappeared every few days. They'd flown just below the radar, evading detection. By avoiding any patterns, Mossad recognized the fingerprints of professional deception. These weren't experimental test sites, they were operational silos, ready to fire. Israel's worst fears were confirmed when a deep-cover operative embedded in Iran, codenamed Uriel, managed to pass along a coded message. The Zulfikar X wasn't alone. It was a part of a coordinated strike plan involving 3 missiles, each targeting a different high-value Israeli site. While Site 27 was the primary target, the other 2 remained unknown. That uncertainty added a new layer of urgency. Israel now had a ticking clock and incomplete information. The Israeli Prime Minister was briefed within the hour. Defensive systems were placed on full alert. though leaders knew traditional air defenses would likely fail against a stealth missile. Emergency protocols were enacted. Cyber units launched a renewed attempt to breach Iran's internal network systems to locate, launch timing and command structures, every available asset, from satellite imaging to deep-fake digital disinformation campaigns, was activated to slow or confuse Iran's chain of command. But Iran had prepared for this. In the days leading up to the operation, they had transitioned all communications related to the missiles to offline systems. No emails, no radio signals, just hand-delivered messages, encrypted USB drives, and in-person command briefings. The plan was in motion, and Iran had closed the door on digital surveillance. Mossad's ability to watch was no longer enough. Now, they needed to act. With confirmation that 3 stealth missiles were ready for launch, Israel moved into a state of silent emergency. The public remained unaware, but inside Israel's highest security circles, a top-secret operation was initiated, Operation Glass Curtain. The objective was simple in theory, but nearly impossible in practice. Stop the missiles before they left the ground. With Iran's launch systems now operating fully offline, the usual tools of cyber warfare were rendered useless. Hackers could not access the targeting systems. Satellites could not intercept guidance data. The digital advantage that Israel had long depended on was gone. The first phase of Operation Glass Curtain focused on disruption. Israeli intelligence began flooding known Iranian military communication lines with false signals and mimicked orders, hoping to cause delays or confusion among missile teams. But this effort had limited effect. Iran had anticipated interference and enforced a strict no-radio policy across all launch sites. Orders were transmitted face-to-face using handwritten codes and locked briefcases. Human couriers carried final instructions to the underground silos, ensuring no digital trace could compromise the mission. With no way to hack the system, Israel prepared for direct action. Elite commando units trained for deep infiltration were placed on standby. Aircraft with stealth capabilities were quietly moved closer to Iranian airspace, ready to strike the launch sites if given the green light. But the risk was enormous. A failed strike would confirm Israel's knowledge of the attack and potentially trigger a regional war. Worse, a successful strike might still fail to stop all 3 missiles in time. Each was hidden in a separate location, and Israel couldn't be sure they had pinpointed them all. As military planners debated their next move, satellite surveillance detected a troubling change. Each of the 3 Iranian launch sites, suddenly, went dark. Power readings dropped, thermal signatures disappeared, and nearby vehicle activity stopped completely. Initially, Israeli analysts believed the sites had been evacuated, but deeper analysis revealed a more terrifying truth. Iran had completed all preparations. The missiles were armed, fueled, and placed under manual control. Launch would now be decided by a final physical command, pressing a button deep inside the silo. No radio transmission, no satellite trigger, just a human hand waiting for the signal. This development eliminated the possibility of a remote disruption. Iran had shut the world out completely. The countdown had entered its final phase. Intelligence leaders realized they were no longer dealing with a digital conflict. This was now a man-to-man race against time. If a solution was to be found, it wouldn't come through cables or code. It would have to come through a risk no one wanted to take, and a plan no one had prepared. For as the countdown to launch inched closer, a new player emerged on the global stage: Russia. In Moscow, the Kremlin was closely monitoring developments in the Middle East, particularly the escalating tensions between Israel and Iran. While Russia had maintained a neutral stance, there were murmurs within the intelligence community that their interest in the Iranian missile development was more than just passive observation. Satellite data confirmed what analysts feared. Russian planes, seemingly without cause, had landed at 2 of the suspected Iranian missile sites. For Israel, this was a chilling development. Russia's involvement in the region had always been a delicate balance. On the one hand, they maintained relations with Iran, supplying them with advanced military technology and engaging in shared geopolitical interests. On the other hand, Russia had been careful not to provoke Israel, knowing the consequences of crossing the line. Israel's fears grew. Had Russia become involved in Iran's missile project? Were they helping Iran refine the Zulfikar X? If so, the stakes had just escalated dramatically. Back in the US, intelligence agencies scrambled to determine the nature of Russia's involvement. Was it an exchange of technology? A political alliance aimed at upsetting the US and Israel's interests in the region? Or was it a covert operation designed to influence the trajectory of the missile threat? The presence of Russian planes near Iran's missile silos indicated a much more direct interest than anyone had anticipated. Despite these fears, the Kremlin's position was enigmatic. Moscow denied any involvement in the missile program and publicly claimed their planes were simply delivering humanitarian aid to Iran, a cover story that no one believed. But behind the scenes, a high-level defector from the Russian intelligence services, codenamed Svetlana, reached out to NATO, revealing a disturbing truth. According to Svetlana, Russia's involvement had little to do with supporting Iran's ambitions to strike Israel. Instead, Russia was merely observing the success of Iran's stealth missile technology, interested in reverse engineering it for their own use. The Kremlin was waiting to see if the Zulfikar X would work before committing their full resources. The revelation sent shockwaves through NATO. It meant that Iran was not only developing a game-changing weapon, but that the stakes of the situation had multiplied. If the missile succeeded, not only would Israel face a devastating attack, but Russia would have a powerful new weapon in their arsenal, one that could potentially disrupt the military balance across Europe and the US as well. The US and Israel now realized they were facing an even more complex crisis than before. It was no longer just about preventing an Iranian strike on Israel. If the missile launched successfully, it could have global consequences, shifting the power dynamics in the Middle East and beyond. Every decision from this point on would need to be calculated with precision. One wrong move could ignite a conflict that spanned continents. The clock was ticking, and the world was holding its breath, waiting for the next move in a game no one wanted to play. As the deadline for the missile launch loomed, tensions reached a boiling point. Israel's defense system was in full gear, with all available military and intelligence resources focused on preventing the imminent strike. But with Iran's launch sites now fully sealed off and operating under manual control, Israel faced a terrifying reality. There was nothing they could do to stop the missiles once they were fired. The countdown had become an unavoidable certainty, unless someone could find a way to delay, distract, or disrupt the launch in the final moments. Israel's top military officials began exploring every possible avenue, from diplomatic channels to covert sabotage. The US government, working alongside Israel, ramped up their covert operations to monitor the launch sites, using satellites and human intelligence to try to pinpoint the exact moment when the missiles would be launched. The plan was to stop it just before the final command was given. But without clear knowledge of the exact launch time, it was like trying to defuse a bomb with only a few seconds left. Meanwhile, as Israel scrambled to respond, Iran's military command was making its final preparations. Unbeknownst to the outside world, a quiet change had occurred within Iran's leadership. The supreme leader, in a sudden shift of strategy, ordered a 24-hour delay on the launch. While the reason for the delay was not made public, there were whispers within the Iranian military that it was a precautionary measure. Some feared that the missile system had been compromised, perhaps by the escalating international focus, or the possibility that an external actor, such as Israel or the US, had managed to infiltrate their operations. The delay was a calculated move to buy time and assess any new information. The delay, however, created an additional layer of uncertainty. Israeli intelligence was now in a race against time, forced to act quickly before Iran could proceed with the launch once the delay expired. They began to refocus on the operation's most critical element, the location and movements of Iran's top missile commanders. It was possible that a disruption at the very heart of the operation, the launch control center itself, could slow down the entire process. In the meantime, Israel's cyber units, along with their American counterparts, launched an all-out assault on Iran's communication networks, hoping to penetrate the air gaps in Iran's offline control systems. Despite these efforts, It became clear that traditional methods of warfare would not be enough. Israel was now considering an unprecedented solution, sending a covert team of elite operatives deep into Iranian territory, past several layers of military defenses, to take direct action. It would be a high-risk mission, and failure would almost, certainly guarantee retaliation, an escalation that could spiral into a full-scale conflict. But it was a move they had no choice but to consider. As the 24-hour delay dwindled, the world held its breath. If this final window of opportunity closed without action, the consequences could be catastrophic. In Tehran, as the hour approached, the decision was made. The launch would proceed. Israel had no more time, and the fate of millions now hinged on one question. Could Israel's last-ditch effort succeed in stopping the missiles before it was too late? The operation that Israel had planned was unlike anything they had attempted before. The decision to send in a covert team of operatives, known as Sayeret Matkal, Israel's most elite unit, was made in the highest secrecy. Their mission was to infiltrate one of the missile launch sites, specifically the one closest to the borders with Afghanistan, and disable it from the inside. There would be no room for failure. Failure meant not only the potential loss of Israeli lives, but also the real possibility of a catastrophic global conflict. The team of highly trained soldiers, led by Colonel Yossi Sharvat, began their journey in the dead of night, disguised as civilian workers. They were inserted deep into Iranian territory using a combination of advanced stealth technology and disinformation. Their presence was meant to remain undetected, even if the operation was compromised at the last moment. They would move quickly, and with surgical precision. For several days, the team traversed hostile terrain and avoided checkpoints. They navigated through complex Iranian military infrastructure, often under the cover of darkness. With each passing hour, the pressure mounted. They were drawing closer to their target, a site hidden in a remote valley, one of the 3 launch zones where the Zulfikar X missiles were stored. It was surrounded by heavily armed guards and advanced surveillance systems, each one more sophisticated than the last. But these were not barriers that Sayeret Matkal couldn't overcome. The operatives entered the final phase of their mission when they reached a ridge overlooking the site. From there, they could see the missile silos, fully prepared, the long-range stealth missiles waiting for the final launch code to be entered. The team was tasked with not just sabotaging the silos, but also ensuring the destruction of any communication systems that could relay the launch command. This would delay Iran's ability to launch the missiles, potentially giving Israel enough time to either neutralize the other sites or use diplomatic channels to defuse the situation entirely. At that moment, as the team set their charges and cut through surveillance wires, the unexpected happened. An alarm sounded. Something had triggered the site's automated defense systems. The operatives froze. They had been compromised. The team was forced into a race against time, knowing that within minutes, Iranian military forces would swarm the area. Sharvat and his team moved quickly, setting the charges, but the enemy was closing in fast. Their every move was being watched. It was no longer about stealth. It was about survival. In the chaos, one of the operatives, Lieutenant Amir, noticed a flickering red light on his wrist communicator. The message was short, but the weight of it was clear. Launch imminent. You have 5 minutes. The countdown was no longer theoretical. It was real. The fate of Israel, and perhaps the world, was about to be determined in those few critical moments. With seconds to spare, the team completed their mission. Explosions erupted across the site, disabling the missiles and the communication systems. That could have activated them. But as they made their escape, they were forced to leave behind key intel, details about the other 2 missile sites that remained hidden. Israel had won this battle, but the war wasn't over yet. The team's return was just the beginning of an even larger race to prevent a global disaster. As the dust settled from the explosion at the missile site, the operatives of Sayeret Matkal, exhausted and shaken, made their way back to their extraction point. They had managed to disable the launch facility, but they knew that their victory was a fragile one. The destruction of that one site had delayed Iran's missile strike, but it had not neutralized the entire threat. The other 2 missile sites were still operational, and the clock was ticking toward an inevitable conflict. In Israel, the government was on high alert, unsure of whether to celebrate the success of their elite forces or brace for an Iranian retaliation. The team had destroyed the key site, but without concrete intelligence on the other two locations, the threat of a missile launch remained a constant pressure. Israel's military leadership had no choice but to prepare for the possibility that the remaining missiles would be launched in retaliation for the attack. Diplomatic channels had been exhausted, and Iran was already in a state of heightened readiness. Their next move would likely come in the form of a strike against Israel, or its allies. Behind the scenes, however, something unexpected was happening. The intelligence community, both in Israel and the US, was scrambling to uncover any remaining leads that might shed light on the whereabouts of the two other missile sites. Through a combination of cyber reconnaissance, intercepted communications, and human intelligence, Israeli operatives managed to uncover a breakthrough. A high-ranking defector from Iran's military intelligence had provided a detailed map of the missile network, including precise coordinates for the two remaining sites. With this new intelligence, Israel acted quickly. The government greenlit a coordinated strike on both sites, backed by US support and the full might of Israel's Air Force. The mission was as high risk as it was urgent. These sites were heavily fortified, and the risk of casualties was high. The operation, codenamed Judgment Day, would rely on the element of surprise and rapid execution. As Israeli fighter jets soared over Iranian airspace, tensions soared. The pilots knew they were not just targeting missile silos, they were aiming at the precipice of war. If the strike failed, or if Iran interpreted it as an act of aggression, there would be no turning back.